Have you ever swam up close and personal with a tiger shark or jumped out of a helicopter on a rescue mission? Neither have I, but my guest, Chris Cameron, has done both. Chris is a first responder, pilot, and wildlife guide. And when I say wildlife guide, I am talking about guiding folks up close to sharks or alligators and not in a cage. Get ready for some great adventures, not only in the water, but in the air with Chris Cameron. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Back to the show. My name is Jake Bushman, and I am the host of Journey with Jake. We are on episode 123 today, and I was thrilled to be able to speak with Chris Cameron. Before we get to my conversation with Chris, I want to mention a few ways to get to know me and my guests just a little bit better. First and foremost, give me a follow on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. This is the best way to see some clips from the show, see what my guests look like, and a way to get to know me personally as well. Journey with Jake is also available on YouTube. If you get an inkling to watch the episode, you can do that on YouTube. My YouTube channel can be found by searching for Journey with Jake Podcast. If you venture onto YouTube, I would love it if you could subscribe to my channel. Another avenue I don't talk much about is my website, which is found at journeywithjake.net. You will find all 123 episodes on my website, and this is a good way to go back through and see what we have done on the show by browsing the episodes on the website. As you all know, Journey with Jake is an adventure podcast, and my guest today is all about adventure. From flying planes and helicopters to swimming with sharks, Chris Cameron is up for it. One thing I loved about Chris was his honesty about the challenges of being a first responder, and he also talked about being present and how swimming with sharks is one of the best ways to be present. This is a fantastic episode. If you like this, you will also enjoy episode 76 with Allison Burkhard about her year of discovery and ocean freediving. Be sure and check out my episode with Allison. All right, let's get to my conversation with Chris Cameron. I'm excited today. I have Chris Cameron on Journey with Jake with me. Chris, welcome to the show.
Jake, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is exciting. This is an adventure podcast. We talk about overcoming challenges through adventure. And I look at your profile and I see first responder, I see pilot, I see wildlife guide, I see entrepreneur. I'm like, this guy's got adventure written all over him.
Yeah.
So before we dive into all that, we're going to jump into some of that, maybe not all of it, but we'll dive into little bits and pieces of some of your story.
Sure.
That's what I want to know. I want to know a little bit about who you are. So if you don't mind, can you give us a little background, kind of where you're from, where you grew up, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my background and where I'm from is a big part of why I do what I do and my story. So I live here in South Florida. I'm in the Palm Beach County area. So we're just on the East Coast on the Atlantic Ocean. And rarely I'm a third generation Floridian, so which is like hard to find, right? Usually somebody's a transplant from New York or wherever, but I'm born and raised 3 generations here in the Peninsula State. So my family that settled here generations ago were cattle farmers in the middle of the state. And then we kind of trickled down further and further south to this final landing spot. But growing up, I always had a bunch of family that still had land and was still in the calving industry up in the middle and North Florida. So I'd spend my summers at ranches, working with cattle, working with horses, and just getting into trouble around farms. But then the beauty and just kind of what raised me is I could spend my summers up there out in the middle of the state, kind of in the countryside, and then I'd come back home and I've got the Atlantic Ocean right here. And if I run a boat out 15, 20 minutes out that way, I'm in world-class fishing. So it's always been the best of both worlds for me. It was like a huge shaper of my childhood and just being outdoors. And that's what got the adventure bug going, right? So it started at a young age. And Yeah, born and raised here. And then I've lived everywhere else. I went to college. I was fortunate enough to play at Mississippi State University. I played football there for 4 years, and then came back home and got into, I guess, what are my professional careers now, which is sometimes it's even kind of I can't even like wrap my head
What do
around
you
it.
do,
But
right?
yeah, what do I do, right? And it's funny because I usually answer that, but I'm like, well, depending on who asks me, I'm like, all right, well, do they want like the white collar, like professional answer, or like who am I talking to here? But being that it's an adventure podcast, so I years ago founded a dive charter, and specifically the dive charter was centered around shark interactions or just apex interactions in general. So anything big, whether that was whales, whether that was dolphins, whether that was sharks. Me and a group of friends of mine kind of perfected the art of without cages, without scuba gear, just going out and repetitively being able to safely kind of do these dives again and again and again with the public. At first, it was just our friends, people that were crazy enough to come along, and that's how it started. And then I was very fortunate enough at a young age. There was a man who was a big influence on me. His name's Manny Puig. He might recognize the name. Some of your followers might, but he was the stunt coordinator for the Jackass films and the Wild Boy films, as well as a huge legendary spear fisherman, commercial spear fisherman down here in South Florida. But he was one of the first ones to ever start doing alligator diving in the Everglades in really, really murky conditions. And he took me out for my first dive when I was 11 years old. And then that's the first time I ever saw, alligators in the wild face to face, no cages. So that all kind of started young. And then from there, I got into spearfishing and it just kind of just rolled on from there. It was just growing up in Florida. If you're a Florida boy, that's just normal. It's kind of weird to say, but that's that's a skill set like any other part of the country. That's growing up. You interact with these animals, whether you're fishing or diving or just, in the backcountry. And it just becomes pretty commonplace and just something that you deal with as a part of life. So doing it professionally and guiding people was really just kind of polishing up a skill set that I'd already developed when I was a kid, and just making sure that I could replicate it time after time and putting in safety protocols and that type of thing. So that's one of the jobs.
Yeah.
And then second to that, which I guess usually when people ask, I'm like, well, the professional job is I'm a professional pilot. So I fly for the sheriff's office here in Palm Beach County. So I fly their helicopters and we have some fixed wing aircraft as well. So I'm dual rated, can fly helicopters and airplanes, but the day to day is usually just catching bad guys from a helicopter. So, which has an adventure side of it too. It's
for sure.
Yeah, every call is like an action movie type thing. And then we're a really robust unit here in South Florida because of the hurricanes, because of the Everglades and the ocean. We do inshore and offshore SAR, so search and rescue. So I'm also a rescue swimmer and an overland rescuer as well as hoist operation. We've got 300 feet of stainless steel cable. We can drop down baskets. We can drop down people, whatever it is to get people out of harm's way and get them back to that next level of care. So that's kind of the 9 to 5, I guess.
Yeah. Well, all right. So this is impressive. Let me talk about the professional thing for a minute.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I'll dive back into some of the other stuff you talked about. Okay. So you said you're flying these helicopters or these planes chasing bad guys. Do you have to have, are you like a certified police guy? Like, are you?
Yeah. Yeah. We're all deputized.
Okay. You're all deputized. Okay.
Yeah. I've made an
skills
arrest
too.
from the helicopter. Yeah. We've
Wow,
landed
okay.
and we've made arrests. Yeah. So we still carry our firearm. We do our training every year to keep our status as deputies and certified law enforcement officials. So all the CPR training, all the firearms training, we do that every single year on top of our piloting skill set and just staying on top of that.
Okay. And then you got the search and rescue side of things, which has to be a whole nother thing.
Yeah, that's another layer to the cake. And that's probably search and rescue, especially with hoist operations and the cable and dropping down rescue devices. That's one of the most dangerous things you can do in a helicopter, aside from probably getting shot at. But you mix stainless steel cable with rotor blades and tail rotors. There's
weather.
Very small. Yeah, and weather changing conditions, and there's small margins for error there. So it's a very they're very intense flights, that I'll say. You're really locked in and zoned into your job for the entirety of the time that you're in the air.
I would think it would have to be a little bit, it's got to be gratifying because you're helping a lot of people, but you got to have those moments too where maybe you couldn't save somebody or you've had that moment. What's it
Yeah.
like for you? Kind of what's it like for you doing this?
Yeah, it's a difficult profession, and that's a great insight. It's a difficult profession in that reference. There are days where you come home and you're super proud of the job you did. You know, especially I think you ask any person that's in law enforcement or military, you go into these things wanting to help, wanting to make some type of difference, right? And there's days that you get to achieve that, and then there's days where you don't and you fall short, whether you were too late or whatever the case may be, whatever the circumstances were. I mean, I recently had that on a rescue swim a couple of weeks ago where an aircraft went into the water, and we got there on scene, and I was the first rescuer on scene, got into the water, and was hoping, praying in the back of my mind that there was an air bubble or a pocket in the aircraft, but it wasn't the case. You know, at that point you're recovering bodies, and those moments will just, they just, you know, we have great tools to deal with them. I think mental health has come a long way in the first responder profession, but you still, you know, have trouble sleeping that night thinking, if I could have done this, if we would have been faster, if this call would have come out at this time, you know, you're always going to try and run it back and see what you could have done better. But I think that's important to the profession too, because you're always kind of self-criticizing so that you can put out a better product. But it's definitely up and down. You have to have a strong support system, and you have to have a system in place to process that stuff. And I've tried to put something together that works for me. But it's, you know, it's definitely can be an uphill battle some days.
Do you mind kind of sharing maybe some of the things that you do to kind of help you, you know, when you're kind of in those modes where it's difficult? What are some of the things you do?
Absolutely. So I've, for a long time, when difficult calls or scenarios would happen, I always found myself going through them and saying to myself, okay, how do I hit the reset button? How do I get back to who I was 3 hours before this took place? And it wasn't until probably, I might have been just 6 months, at least maybe a year ago, that I came to the realization, just a light bulb moment in some reflection, that there's no going back. I was always trying to like do this process of like, how do I reset? But there is no reset. It's life continues now from this point forward. And then you've just got to process what actually took place. And I find that if I can glean something from it, if I can, you know, make myself better as a first responder, if I can make my unit better, or the crew that I was with that day, or if I can find some type of positive to pull forward into the future, that I'll say, okay, this is who I am now with these new set of experiences. This is what I have and have gained from it. Now let's move forward with life. And that way, in that sense, for me, I'm able to continue to perpetually move forward and not be stuck. And that's what's going to work for me.
I like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned too about having a strong support system. Who do you have as your support system?
Oh, I mean, fantastic enough is the unit that we have, all of the pilots and co-pilots that I work with. We've got a great culture of guys and the ladies as well in the unit, that we check in with each other, because it's hard to find, even with a supporting, you know, girlfriend, wife, family, whatever it is, it's different when there's somebody that really knows what you're going through. And we've got a fantastic culture in our unit that kind of, you know, because you know what everybody's baseline is. So when they're having an off day, you're able to just say, hey, let's have a conversation, you know, come chat with me real quick, and then check in. And so that's number one. I've got a fantastic girlfriend whose father was in NYPD for, you know, a 25-year career. She gets it, you know, in that respect. And a family that's very supportive of my career as well, and always checking in. So the immediate family is fantastic. And then very blessed to have a unit that I work with that's kind of forward thinking in that regard. And I don't know if that's the case, you know, across the country, but certainly lucky to have it here.
Sounds like you're blessed in that respect. Then you got a great
Absolutely.
family, great girlfriend, and then your own people that you work with day in and day out.
Oh, and I got a cute dog as well.
And you got a dog.
Yeah, the dog's the best part. Come here, girl.
Gotta have that dog, right?
Yeah. Something to cuddle and hug at the end of the night.
Yeah, exactly. It's always gonna love you no matter what, right?
Yeah, so right. She thinks
good.
I'm great. I've never done anything wrong.
I want to kind of go back to your childhood a little bit, because you said a couple of things that really struck me. You said being close to this wildlife, doing that sort of thing in Florida, that's just you being a kid. That's just
Yeah.
growing up in Florida. That's what it's like. And you did your first alligator dive when you were 11 years old. Can you tell me about that, what that experience was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was sharks and alligators at a really young age because I first started spearfishing. And then as soon as you start spearfishing and a little blood gets in the water, eventually you're going to see sharks. It's not always like a crazy Jaws movie scenario, but they start to poke around. And once I started seeing sharks, I was like, oh man, this is the coolest thing ever. So I kept trying to replicate that. And I'd shoot fish that, were kind of junk fish that you would cut up for bait. And I would just break them up in the water to just see what would show up. And then as far as the alligator dive thing, yeah, close family friend took me out into the Everglades, to some areas in South Florida where through the Everglades and the filtration system of that kind of preservation wildlife sanctuary, you get pretty clean freshwater flow. So as far as freshwater diving goes, it's amazing visibility. And that's like 12, 15 feet. So if you can see 12, 15 feet in the Everglades, you're like in the Holy Lands. That's like the best scenario
golden.
ever. Yeah, you're really onto something. And so we would just swim on the surface, just snorkel on the surface to kind of little pockets of different topography where we knew they would usually be during that time of year. And you'd either see them typically on the bottom, and I'd have a light with me, and you just kind of flash the light through the water, and you'd catch two glowing eyes, and that was it. I mean, it was purely observational. We weren't going and putting our hands on anything, but that was enough. And it was a huge learning curve to keep your heart rate under control. And I learned some skills at a very young age that have helped me through a lot of different areas and components of my life. But yeah, it was such a thrill to be able to share the water with something like an apex predator without barriers. And you have to know your limitations, and you have to have some expertise and some knowledge about body posture and body language and that type of thing. But when you're with somebody that you trust and that knows that environment, it was incredible. It just like, it would just light a fire that it was like, that was living, like moments of just raw nature, and these very, very impressive animals that could just explode in just this display of raw power in a second if they wanted to, or if they felt threatened or needed to. It was just very different to see than going to a zoo or whatever the case may be, which definitely has its upside. But when you are there in their world, it's just it's special, and it puts you in your place in the world too. I think that is like a huge component of wildlife and being out in nature that I take away, is that you want to feel small, and you want to feel like, and you want to humble yourself, go jump off the boat, 4 miles offshore, and then have the boat drive away. And you will immediately, have an understanding of just how tiny we are on this big rock. So yeah, special
absolutely.
moments.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. And I love the fact that you use that to then create, another business for you, which, by the way, how do you have the time with doing your police work, your pilot, getting trained as being a pilot, and still doing your guide business? How do you do all this?
There was a lot of double dipping. There was a lot of like low sleep nights. Thankfully, now that I've got everything established, my schedule is it's kind of like feast and famine. So 4 days of 12-hour shifts, and then just kind of balls to the wall with the helicopter thing, and then 4 days of time to myself. And I'm just the type of person where after I get the first day of recharging my batteries, I can't sit around for 3 more days. So, it's just right on to the next. And now I used to have the businesses that were open to the public, but now after I sold those, I just cater to private clients at this time. So it's just, I've got a handful of clients that I've been leading their dives for, wherever they want to go in the world, whatever they want to see, whether I've taken clients to go see great whites in Guadalupe, Mexico, the Bahamas for tiger sharks and hammerheads, dolphins, you name it. So, or if they just want to come here in our backyard, we can do it here. But so I'm a lot more selective now and not as strapped for time as I used to.
That's good.
Yeah.
You worked your way into that.
Yeah. Because you got to build relationships. I mean, my job is to get you in the water and get you as close to the animal as you feel comfortable. and to be able to get that really, really just special observation moments, and then get you back on the boat safely. And then hopefully, the reason I like doing it with private clients is that I get to really personally work on their skill set in the water. Like we will take you from here to here to here over the course of, a couple of trips. And, at that point, maybe they've got the skill set to go hands on with the animal and do some redirects and that type of thing. So yeah, it's cool to see people grow. That I really enjoy. It kind of just feels like diving with a buddy and just watching them grow.
That's good. Okay, you said a word there, and I'm picturing it in my mind. You said, get them to do some redirects.
Redirects, yeah.
Are you redirecting these sharks?
Yeah.
Is that what
absolutely.
that is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about that. What's all involved with that?
Yeah, so sharks are phenomenal animal, and we redirect more than sharks. You'll be amazed at how pushy dolphins can get sometimes. But sharks are very, very naturally curious, especially when you're going to areas. There are some dive spots that are commercialized where kind of the sharks know the routine, but you go to more distant places, and once those first couple hours are spent in the water and the sharks start to acclimate to what's going on and they get a little bit more curious and a little bit more pushy, they just start closing the gap. And whether you're ready or you're not, it's their territory. They start moving in, with a little bit more speed and a little bit closer to you. So being able to be comfortable and actually place your hands on the animal and just gently guide them. It's not like a grab it, shake it, Hollywood movie, but just to have just the presence and the calmness and stillness to just place your hands on the animal and just give it a gentle deflection and like, hey, we would prefer if you went this way. And that's like all you're doing. We'd prefer if you went that way.
I don't want you coming right towards my face. I would prefer
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd prefer you to go that way. And that's really all it is you just putting your hands on the animal and just guiding it along.
Have you had any close calls?
Yeah, I've been bit.
Okay, have you? All right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've never been, I like to clarify this. I've never been attacked. I've been bit because I made mistakes. And that was very, very early trying to figure out how to do this. Usually there's some areas that sharks, just their natural curiosity will get them to show up. But in most cases, you're going to have to put some type of bait source in the water. And whether it was for photography or videography or trying to get a shot, I'd have bait in my hands and be trying to drag it across a camera or set something up. And there was a couple of times where the current was pushing this way. I was dragging bait that way. I let go of the bait. Bait came right back to me. Shark went right for the bait. And I did this at the last second and just right on the elbow. But real quick, just the presence and calmness to, as it kind of clamped down, just another redirect. Hey, I'd prefer you not do that. And off she went. So it happens, right?
Yeah.
It comes with the territory. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially you as the guide who's kind of because you got to be in the mix of it and making sure your clients are safe. I'm guessing that's kind of your priority.
You're like by the end of the day, if it's a busy day and I've got to watch the client and everything, like my neck is like, I'm like the old Batman. I'm like turning.
Just kidding. Keep it
neck
turning.
Can't move. Yeah. So my neck is definitely sore at the end of the day because you're just constantly scanning. Because most sharks are. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. Most sharks are, I guess the best way to, they're ambush predators and they're very opportunistic. So your eyesight and making eye contact is your number one deterrent. If you can make eye contact with the shark, it makes eye contact with you, and then you play this kind of little game of chicken, and all of a sudden, boom, they make their turn. So you're constantly scanning. Your eyes are going to the closest one, and it's just it's a very it's an interesting process because you can't be anywhere but where you are. Your mind can't be anywhere else. You are just completely in the moment, 100%.
And you're respecting the wildness. I mean, these are wild animals. They're not pets.
Absolutely.
You respect that. One thing I know, with Hollywood and everything, sharks are kind of villainized. They're kind of like,
for sure,
these things. What's your thoughts? I mean, what's your thoughts on that? And why do you love sharks so much?
I think because of the separation between land and sea and just the kind of the mystique of sharks being below the surface, I think that just the natural fear of people just takes over. I completely understand that. I mean, I remember being scared when I was younger before I started getting in the water. I think it's just, the unknown is just a natural fear barrier that you've got to break down. But like I said, I've never been attacked. I've never seen one beeline for me, hell bent on, rolling back to those dull black eyes and the whole Quint Jaws, monologue where it was like it wanted to swallow my soul and all that kind of stuff. It's never been that. It's just a wild animal that really tells you the truth every time you look at it. I've never had, I like to tell people this. They're like, well, isn't it dangerous? And this, that, and the other. Like, I've never had a wild animal lie to me. They tell me exactly what they're going to do before they're going to do it with their body posture. They're more honest than humans. So if you can just learn those things and kind of pick up on what those processes are, you'll find yourself very, very comfortable with a very, very honest creature. So
wow,
that's the way I think of it.
That's a good way to look at it. This is intriguing. This is fascinating to me. Something that I find interesting too, because I've seen those videos, where like here's the Florida coastline and you got all these people on the beach, and literally just right off the beach, there's like 100 sharks, and I don't even think the people on the beach know it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, what do you say to someone who like me, who's let me go visit Florida? Do I have to have a fear? Like, what should I be thinking?
Yeah, no, I think we get that a lot because we're such a big tourism state too. And the funny thing is I see it daily from my other job. Like I spend a lot of time in the water, but I'll cruise down the coast and look out, the left side of the helicopter as we're headed north, and I'll just kind of chuckle to myself like that person has no clue. And it's the best thing that could happen to them that they don't know. It's like the ignorance is bliss thing. Nature's doing nature's thing, you're doing your thing, and we just, every time they intersect, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it does. And for the most part, it's they're sharks don't have hands, and so if they're gonna poke and guess at what something is, it usually comes with what we refer to as like a test bite, and that's usually what most of those interactions are, because you're in their territory, you're in murky water, you're in the surf, crashing waves. It's their ocean. We just get to our summer break in it. But yeah, I mean, to that, I don't think it's anything that anybody should have a fear for. It's just, you'd be better served to know the reality of it. It is, and the reality is that they're there.
Same they're there. Just be mindful. Anytime you get in the water, they're there. So you just gotta be mindful of that. And
goes with the ocean, prepared. And the same thing with the murky water here, inland Florida. If it's wet, probably an alligator in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just, it's a little Jumanji-ish around here.
Yeah. Any particular place or experience of shark diving that you just means a lot to you, that you remember, that just is, wow, it was a moment?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot, but I think one of them, so there's a place off the coast of Mexico, the island of Guadalupe. It's a dormant volcano, and usually to go out there to dive out there, it's a park that's maintained by Mexico. But you go out there in a liveaboard, you drop the cages in, it's all regulated in the cages, pure observation. But you steam out there, you leave the day before, you start steaming out there all night, and then you wake up the next morning, the day that you're going to get to the island, and it's like straight out of King Kong. I mean, you're talking like a mountain that just jets out of the water. There's dramatic fog draped around the entire thing. Like in your mind, you're thinking the Jurassic Park theme song should be playing. And then you pull up into this cove, anchor the boat, and they start, putting some chim out in the water. And then you start to see in this instance, I'm not afraid to say it, some very Jaws-like imagery where you get this fin, cutting through the water. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is straight out of Hollywood. And then you get in the cages and you get, the visibility in Guadalupe is amazing. It's the best place in the world to see white sharks, because you can see for 300-400 yards out into just crystal clear blue. So the first shark you see as it approaches the boat, I mean, you're like, oh, what's that little fish? And then a couple seconds later, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it's right up at the cage, and it's literally blocking out the sun. And a school bus is just calmly just swimming by you. And I remember just first time I ever went out there, I remember just thinking to myself, this is cool. Like, you grow up as a little kid thinking about dinosaurs and this, but you don't ever get to see, most of us don't get to see nature that big and that powerful, like face to face, and just the pure size and like you're just, you know that you're looking at something just perfected by evolution. And then the first time that thing powers up and goes and chases one of they throw out these large tuna carcasses to get the sharks to come up. And it's just like you'd see on like a Shark Week. The great whites will breach and they'll come, tail out of the water. And you see that 20-foot animal power up and just go full prehistoric. You're just like, wow, like there's still mystery in the world. There's, it just kind of like stirs up this magic that you kind of think about when you're a kid. And then you get to see it, at real world, and it's a game changer.
What's that doing for you when you're in the water seeing that? Like,
You're just there. I mean, like you're like kind of like I was alluding to earlier, but just even more so. Your mind can't be anywhere else. Like you are just so in awe. It's pure presence. Like you're not thinking about bills. You're not thinking about getting dumped. You're not like it. None of that matters. It's like nature is putting on a show, and you are just happy to have a ticket. And you're just kind of trying to breathe through your scuba gear, but you also have your mouth kind of open and you're just trying to make it work.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite shark?
I'm close to the Bahamas. We can make like a 50-mile run out there. We have Tiger Beach, which is one of the most prolific tiger shark dive spots. It's one of their breeding grounds. And you can go 50 miles, a couple hours that way, and it's the biggest tiger sharks in the world. And the stripe pattern, the intelligence, they're very, very smart. They know visibility. They'll stay just on the edge of where you think or where they think you can see them. And all you can see is kind of the hazy stripe pattern. And then, if you lose sight of them, all of a sudden you'll get bumped on the back of the head and they'll swim right over top of you. So they're very, very intelligent. And like it kind of just feels like you're playing a game when you're diving with them, and it's a lot of fun. And they're gorgeous animals, and I love everything about them.
Wow.
So tiger sharks for sure.
Tiger sharks are your shark. Do people say you're crazy, or what what do the people around you think, or is it just because they're from Florida too that it's like, oh, this is just Chris?
Luckily I'm surrounded by a lot of Floridians, so we're all crazy in our own way. But no, I mean, like every time my mom sees me, and I've got something going on, she'll just look at me and she'll just say, just stay safe. So and I tell her every time, like, listen, nobody wants to keep their arms more than I do, trust me. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are just like, I could never do that. That's insane. And I've taken those same people into the water, whether it's in the Everglades or in the ocean. And once the heart starts settling down and they realize that, I dare say it can be a little bit therapeutic, because again, like I was saying, just you're purely present, and people really get captivated by it. And part of my skill set and what my job is to do is just to bring the show to you. So if you can breathe through a snorkel and not freak out, you can do it. I'll do the rest. So and then people wind up just it's a life-changing experience for them, which is really gratifying for me to see. So yeah,
I think you kind of got you got some mixing both your profession with in law enforcement, first responder, but also doing the guide, because you're definitely got some satisfaction with both. Do you have, and is there a difference? Like which one gets you more animated? Like, is it flying these planes, or is it going underwater, or is it kind of the same, or is it different but the same? If that makes sense.
That's a great question. And I would say so I've actually been asked something similar to this before, and I kind of like stumbled upon the answer after being asked. So I've polished it up a little bit. But there's like two dynamics in both the diving that I do and aviation that are very, very similar. So, and what make it very satisfying to me. So in aviation and in the dive guide, there's kind of like a very linear system to it at first. So it's checklist, it's preparation, it's planning, it's all of these kind of like black and white rules. And that's very satisfying to me. Like my male brain, it's just very linear, check my boxes, checklist.
Yeah.
It feels good to have those dialed in. Because like after that, systems are a go, let's go get after it. And then you get to this second portion of it in the air or in the water, where you're kind of in the water, you're using your body and the animals to just kind of paint and just flow. And then the same thing with the aircraft. When you're asked to do something, especially the helicopter world where you're low and we're trying to get certain angles through the camera and getting eyes on people, and we're going around buildings. Like, you're molding man and machine, and it's just like this flow state. So it's kind of like a little, it's got like this kind of like feminine artsy vibe to it. And then it switches back to, all right, the job is done or the dive is done. Let's check all our safety boxes. Let's get back to the boat. Let's land the aircraft. And it's back to that like linear thinking. So there's like this polarity that I experience in both of those separate endeavors that are very satisfying. It's like a very complete process. It's this linear and then this non-linear where you get to really just be like expressive, and then it ends with linear again. And then like by the time I'm done, I'm like what a day. Like, nobody's got it better. Just feeling like 100%.
Awesome. I like that.
Yeah.
Good perspective on that. What are some of the challenges that you face, like kind of day in and day out, where you're like, oh, these are, whether they're mental or whether they're the physical aspects of it? What are some of the challenges that Chris faces?
The physical side of it is, it never stops, especially on the rescue swimmer side. That is, you are either ready for it or you are not. And there's no in between, because when you go to swim and you hit the water, it's all out for however long it needs to be all out for. And, situation dictates. So I constantly feel both a mental pressure to stay physically ready. I swim every single day. I hit my laps in the pool. I run my miles. I'm still lifting weights. I mean, that's just, that's the only way that I can feel prepared. If I miss a day, I feel like I carry like a big weight on my shoulder that I could be potentially letting someone down. Wow. So that mental side of things, like I kind of have to, I've just got my process, and I got to stick to my process to make me feel like I'm ready. So the physical side of it is definitely there. The mental side of it, yeah, just feeling that pressure. And really the only way to stave that off for me is to just know that I'm physically ready. And but there's a whole other side of it. Aviation is you got to know a lot about a lot. Like, in life, you can get by with knowing a little about a lot, but aviation is, nobody told me when I was a kid and I was like, I want to be a pilot. I saw Top Gun. I want to be a pilot. Nobody told me, well, you're going to have to, be a meteorologist. You're going to have to know how to interpret law as far as the rules and everything. You're going to have to know how systems work. You're going to have to know how jet engines work. You're going to have to be semi-engineer. Like, if I'd have known that, I would have picked something else. So like, I start my day every day. I crack open the book, like the basic books, like literally like your student pilot. I always say I've got a 32 gig brain and I got 64 gigs of stuff to remember. So if I'm not constantly, that's part of my process. I wake up and I study my craft every single day. Because it's the only way that I feel confident when I power up the machine, that I know what I'm doing. I don't ever want to be, as a professional, in what do we do in this scenario moment? I just don't ever, I don't ever want to feel like I'm an imposter. I want to be what I am, and what I am is a professional. So it's important to me to just keep that process, keep that skill set sharp, and never let it fall.
I appreciate that you said that, because I think sometimes we sit and look at people like, oh, they just got it going on. But you have to work. You have to go even to the basics.
Yeah.
To learn
absolutely.
it.
I go back to it every single day. Some days it's literally just reviewing stuff like airspaces. And then some days I'm deep diving into, electrical bus systems. And if this fails, I can get as complicated or as simple as I want. But my point is I have to review it all, constantly do. Because there's a lot of people in any profession, right, that once they get the letters next to their name, once they get the title, they've arrived. And I don't want to be that way.
No, you got to keep it going.
Yeah,
and I appreciate that.
Keep it sharp.
And as someone who has the potential to be rescued by someone like you, I want the person rescuing me to be all over it for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good way to look at it. Mm-hmm. When I picture these rescues, and you've seen the movies and you got the helicopter dropping a basket. I even see people jumping. Are you jumping off into the water to help people? Like, what kind of stuff are you doing?
So we do that. We do what's called helo casting. So 10 knots, 10 feet, just like you'd see like the Coast Guard do, right off into the water, hand over your mask and right into the water. We do that. And then just whatever the situation dictates. If it's black water situation where we can't see the bottom or we're unsure of what's on the bottom, then we'll just hook up to the cable and we'll slowly get lowered in. So It's, obviously, we're not worth anything if we're hurt. We can't rescue, then it turns into a 2-person rescue. So whatever the situation dictates to get us on scene safely and get us into the water, obviously expediency being, part of the equation, but all of that is in constant flux based on what information we have and what the scenario is. So I guess the short answer is we do it all, whatever we need to do.
And I was going to ask kind of what is, because it sounds like it's varied. I mean, the type of rescues and stuff are varied. What is it mostly? Is it boating accidents? Is it just people getting caught in currents? Like, what's kind of the
it's Florida. You name it, it happens.
Okay.
It's boating accidents. It's people getting. I mean, it could be something as simple as a tourist goes paddleboarding, gets can't keep up with the current, gets pulled out of the inlet, and all of a sudden they're a mile offshore and their cell phone doesn't work. It could be that, and it could be somebody off in the Everglades. It could be a 4-wheeler accident. Now they've got a broken leg, and the fire rescue and the actual land vehicles just can't get through the marsh. So it becomes, an aviation unit issue at that point. In most cases, the first thing we do is get on scene and just find out what we got. And then after that, we're making the decision on, because of the risk and the skill of that rescue, we try and go through the scenarios of how can we get this person out without having to do
without
this.
doing it. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a last resort, just because of the risk that it takes for all the crew members to operate it effectively. So, but the answer is if you can dream it here in Florida, it happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any particular moment? I know you shared the one experience earlier about the plane crash, but any other particular moments with search and rescue or even with sheriff's office work that you could share?
Yeah. I think if I were to kind of think of just, my mind always goes to, I forget the good stuff, it's the tough stuff that stays with you. Florida has a lot of bodies of water. Obviously you've got, the ocean, and then you've got a million pools, canals, lakes. It's tough we get a lot of kids, that wander off into pools, that wander off into canals and find themselves, falling down the bank of the canal and unable to get out, and showing up and finding those scenes is tough. I don't have kids yet, but I've got I've got nieces and nephews that I adore, and they're of that very vulnerable age where if you don't have eyes on them, something could happen. So those are tough ones. Those are definitely come home, hug the dog days, and then go make sure I go hang out with the kids that weekend and just love on them. But yeah, the hard ones, the bad days stick with you more than the good, unfortunately. But you just you do the best that you can. You try and get there as fast as you can and make a difference. Which we've been fortunate enough to do that, and have that happen where it was seconds away from going bad, and now they're back with their family, which is great.
Gotta love those ones for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Do you think it's just the perfectionism in you or whatever that you just think about the bad ones more just because it's like those are the ones that you kind of cling on to, like, okay, and how to fix it, or what? Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. I think this job moves at a mile a minute. So, I mean, when I get back from a 12-hour shift and somebody asks me, like, how was your day? I've already forgotten it. I've already forgotten it because it was super intense. And then I got to wake up, I got to do it tomorrow. So I think for me, in order to just stay functional and stay with it, I just have to purge a lot. And it's not that it's all bad stuff that I've got to repress memories or anything. It can be so emotionally draining that you just got to let it go, and then on to the next, just so you can stay fresh and be of service the next day.
Wow. This has been awesome. This has been great. So I appreciate you sharing all this. This has been fascinating talking to you. Appreciate who you are, your personality. What does the future hold for Chris? What are you kind of looking to do as you move forward?
Ooh, so I've January. I was dumb enough to sign up for a marathon. I've never done one of those before. I got that coming up in December, which is good because I've got to prep. I also was dumb enough to good friends of mine just convinced me to start doing the 7 summits. So there is one of the mountains in Argentina. I'm going to butcher it because I don't speak Spanish despite living here in South Florida. Aconcagua or something like that. I don't know, but
sure.
We're summiting it in January. So we've got some fun adventure stuff on the horizon and just things that I wanted to tackle. I think Oh, but in the next couple of years, I'd love to be in a place where I've got more time to step away and take a break. And I'll probably fill those with an adventure too. But I think I definitely am trying to enhance the quality of the time that I've got with my loved ones and not be, and be able to turn my mind off and just take a break from it all. So that's actually my focus coming up. Is
I like it.
Yeah, just a little me time is
like
what's
that.
on my agenda. Yeah.
That's perfect. And just to kind of wrap us up here, for you, Chris, what does adventure mean to you?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think adventure for me, and the reason that I've always been drawn to it is because adventure is all about evolution. And I've always enjoyed the adventure side of things because it's learning a new skill set, it's stretching yourself. I've learned more about myself out in the ocean alone than I ever could in a self-help course or in a book. You really learn on an adventure what you're made of, what your metal is, and you really get comfortable with knowing yourself. There's a lot of quiet time during an adventure. And you got to sit with your thoughts. If you've got any if you got any inefficiencies, they usually start to poke out during an adventure, and you know what you've got to work on to kind of answer the call the next time it comes around. So for me, adventure is just about chasing the horizon, but also chasing that yourself internally and getting better and growing. It's always been a great opportunity for me to grow every time I've been out on an adventure, on an expedition.
Love it. Chris, thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
Jake, thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Chris Cameron for coming on the show. I am truly inspired by Chris and grateful for his service as a first responder and pilot for the Sheriff's Department. Thank you, Chris, for working so hard to be prepared to help others in need. Also, thank you for sharing your adventure side of you, including your time as a guide and why that means so much to you. I would invite all of you to give Chris a follow on Instagram at chriscameron.cc. This is a great way to follow along on not only his adventures in the water, but also his adventures in the air as a pilot. Thanks to each one of you for tuning in and listening to the show. I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That would mean a lot to me. I would also love to hear from you. Please reach out and say hi either through Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast or send me an email, jake@journeywithjake.net. Next week, I have an endurance athlete, Josh Vernon, on the show. Josh has a great story about overcoming addiction and finding himself on the bottom and having to work his way up. It is a great conversation that I hope you can all join me next week. Just remember, it's not always about the destination as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.